And welcome back. This is your man Warrior. This is another patron roster review. This is KIA Keith USM from Shadowlands. What's happening, Shadowlands? Now, Keith's doing really well for himself. Gets into the top 10 easily on both fleets and arena. Has a really great team, still a rebel counter team with Thrawn, and of course he has Wampa in there for counters and Han Solo for counters. So just tons of high damage countering. And then, of course, General Kenobi to mitigate the amount of damage he's dealing. Not a bad counter to basically every team that's out there. Unless you're running against another team that has a Wampa in it, I suppose. But all in all, this is a really not a bad team. So what he wanted, aside from the fact that he wanted me to shout out to Shadowlands for being awesome. Their guild is sweet. They're doing really well at territory wars. They're stomping fools and doing really well. So shout out to the whole guild of Shadowlands for really taking territory wars to the next level. Keith is a Dolphin. He's been playing since the very beginning. So because of that, he's got quite a bit of development over the last 2.5 years. But in Arena, he kind of wants to know what should he do in the short term until he has Darth Traya. And then when Darth Traya, when he has it, what are the two characters he should be using with the Sith Triumvirate? And that's what we're going to go over and discuss. Territory Wars, some basic offensive or defensive teams. And for Bounty Hunters, kind of what's the best composition. And that's going to vary based on what you're going against. But those are what we're going to talk about. So for the Arena, what you have right now is actually good for now. If you happen to run into a Traya team and you're struggling, my go-to for you would actually be a Finn-led resistance team, and just use your exposes and just chew right through that team. It does really well. Or you can use the Biggs Wedge combo, but that one doesn't always work if they're running a double tank, specifically General Kenobi. But the resistance really walks through Traya really pretty good as long as it's the Finn-led. So if you have trouble, throw that team in on offense, go past it, and you can throw your defensive team back in. But all in all, I would leave your team alone in Arena for now. And then when we get you a Traya, you're going to use the Sith Triumvirate, and you know that. And so you're wanting to know what else would you want to do. And we're going to go through it, but the first thing I would do is let's go ahead and pick your Sith. All right. So your Sith, when you run her leadership ability is not as good as Emperor Palpatine. And the reason for that comes down to one thing, and that's speed. That's right. Speed, it does become the most important factor in Arena. And so Emperor Palpatine lead is by far the best. So I would highly recommend an Emperor Palpatine lead, and then the Sith Triumvirate, Darth Sion, Darth Nihilus, and Darth Traya, which you have 2 of them already good to go. And then for the last, you could choose any character. You could use Sith Trooper if you'd like, but I'm going to suggest a different character. That's right. I'm actually going to suggest Grand Admiral Thrawn. Grand Admiral Thrawn is, in my opinion, the single best character in the game for the dark side. There's a lot of different characters, and they all have different benefits and strengths and weaknesses and all of that. But bottom line, this guy is everywhere. He's in the Sith raid. He's in the Hat raid. He's in the Rancor raid. He's in solo teams, 2 different solo teams to solo the raids. You know, for multiple raids, he's one of the best Empire leaders. He's a counter to the Empire meta that's currently going on right now. He's got a capital ship. I mean, just everything about him is absolutely amazing. And he brings Fracture and Ability Block, both of which are hypercritical in Arena. And a lot of people are using Sith Trooper, but he would be able to fracture that Sith Trooper, rendering him useless, and still he would be able to counter and ability block opposing people who are hitting him. So he brings about a superiority over Sith Trooper, in my opinion, because he's still functional when he's fracturing someone. And so because of that, and you can make him really fast and stuff, and then he can pass his turn along, and he regenerates protection, and just there's so much. Whereas Sith Trooper is just basically a tanky tank that causes frustration. And Fracture can't be cleansed off by Traya, whereas if you have buff immunity from, let's say, CLS or someone like that, it can be cleansed and actually applied to your team from the opposing team. And so because of that, again, I highly recommend you run with Grand Admiral Thrawn as your 5th. So now that we know what you're going to do is Emperor Palpatine lead, you would need to obviously Zeta that Emperor Palpatine lead, which you do not have. You can see clearly on the screen. Also, Thrawn, I would highly recommend his unique. Scion Darth Nihilus, I would recommend Darth Nihilus's unique Zeta. And then when you get Traya, I would just do her unique. Don't Zeta her leadership. It's not necessary, and it's not the best composition. So it's one of those things where you would pretty much have to run her as lead if you put a Zeta on her lead. And again, she's inferior to the Emperor Palpatine-led teams, in my opinion. So Emperor Palpatine Zeta, Darth Nihilus Zeta unique, and Traya Zeta on the unique for that future team composition. Now, bounty hunters. There's not a whole lot to choose from, and there's two processes basically you can think about: the old bounty hunters and the new bounty hunters. And the old bounty hunter team really was Boba Fett, IG-88, Greedo, Dengar, and Zam Wesell, and you can continue to use those top 5. And the whole idea here is you're going to be throwing thermal detonators, and Zam is going to be getting a ton of extra turns because she's going to be able to pop those and get 100% turn meter on all of that. That works as an old school team to this day. In fact, it works even better now because of their reworks. It's a very, very solid team. But we do know Bossk will be farmable in the next 3 months, and he is an excellent leader, especially for creating a really, really, really durable bounty hunter team. And that would be important specifically in offense on Territory Wars. And they just got some buffs for damage and things like that in Territory Wars, so they would work really well as a defensive team if you have Bossk as the leader. And so because of that, really it depends on the utility of what you're going to do with them. If you're just using them for like territory battles, there's really no need to use anyone other than the top 5. If you're going to use them and you want to use them defensively or offensively in Territory Wars, you really need to develop your Bossk, get him geared up, and as soon as he hits farmability, go ahead and farm him up. And then he and Boba Fett both have really good leadership abilities, and they have their merits. For me personally, I would suggest a Bossk lead on a defensive team for Territory Wars and a Boba Fett lead on an offensive Territory War team. That's just my opinion, but that's what I would do with bounty hunters. Now, the last thing we're going to go over is we're going to go over Territory Wars, some offensive team compositions and some defensive team compositions. And we'll start kind of with defense because there's some basics everybody kind of goes to. You should probably know all of this, and you probably already do. So if you know all of this, then good for you. But we're just going to go over some basics. Night Sisters do still make a formidable defensive squad for people to deal with. We still to this day use them, and I know people still have difficulty beating our Night Sister squads. Even with their General Veers and all of that, it's still very difficult in Territory Wars with less than optimal teams to be able to get through the Night Sister comps. So, you know, Night Sister comps can vary, but really basically your Ventress, your old Daka, Mother Talzin, Zombie, and I actually have chosen to use Night Sister Spirit as my 5th, but you could use Talia or Acolyte or Initiate, whatever you want. A lot of people use Acolyte, and I would personally use Asajj Ventress as the lead. Do not gear your Zombie up anymore. Leave her that way and just get her up to 7 stars so you can use this team also in the Sith raid, and you know what this team can do in the Sith raid, so go, go, go. This is definitely a great defensive team. Now, a lot of people know resistance is great, and you can actually use resistance on defense or offense, and I use them on both. I use for resistance for defense, Rey Jedi Training, R2-D2, BB-8, and then I use Rey Scavenger and General Kenobi. And then for offense, I actually use Finn Zeta Lead with Poe Dameron, Resistance Trooper, Resistance Pilot, and Amelin Holdo. Holdo's Daze mechanic, Foresight capability, health regeneration makes her phenomenal on offense. As long as you have a fast Poe Dameron, once you get the train going, she really helps prevent them from countering, especially if you're going to use it as an anti-team to go against some of the teams that people use, such as First Order or Empire. This is a really great team against First Order or Empire teams, but this is a great there's this great defensive team in here with the Rey Jedi training team, and then there's great offensive squad capability with the Finn and Poe combo. So remember that as well. Most people know that First Order is phenomenal, and they are absolutely phenomenal for territory wars, defense more specifically. Now, you do obviously want to continue to develop and eventually do the leadership ability Zeta on Kylo Ren Unmasked, but you have a Zeta on Captain Phasma, so I know you can alternate your teams for now, but Kylo Ren Unmasked, you know, if you can get First Order Officer over 230 speed and gear him up, then he would make a great 5th slot in there. And then I would also work on and develop First Order Executioner, get him to 7 stars. All these characters are usable in the regular raids like Sith, and they're going to work great in territory wars, which is what you were asking about. But for the First Order, you really want Kylo Ren Unmasked as your leader, Kylo Ren, just OG Kylo Ren, First Order Executioner, and now Kylo Ren and First Order Executioner are kind of your 2 damage dealers, and then Kylo Ren Unmasked and First Order Stormtrooper are your tanks. And then First Order Officer is there to speed everything up, and put advantage and all sorts of stuff. And then First Order Stormtroopers, Zeta is not necessary, but is pretty awesome. If you can't get your First Order Officer up very high, or you can't get him very fast for whatever reason, you can replace him with Barriss Offee. It really makes this team a crappy team to deal with on defense. With Barriss Offee, because she just prevents a lot of the critical damage by just countering it with health gains. So yeah, a lot of people want to really take this out with high crit damage because of all of the health gain, and so Barriss Offee kind of works in your favor in this kind of a team. So, but continue working on First Order Executioner, and if you can get him fast, First Order Officer, and definitely Kylo Ren Unmasked, and in my suggestion, First Order Stormtrooper as well. And I would use these pretty much always on defense. Now, Empire are really great. It's one of the better factions in the game. There's just a ton of versatility and a lot of really cool characters in here, aside from just the Imperial Troopers and some of the Sith that are in here as well. But you can use like a Thrawn-led Empire team with like Shore Trooper and Thrawn. Those 2 guys together are crazy good. So Thrawn, Shore Trooper, and then you can pair it up with whatever it is you're facing. So if you're facing a Rebels like a CLS team on defense with Territory Wars, take in an offensive Thrawn team. Or you could use Thrawn as a defensive team and have, you know, like Shore Trooper, Royal Guard, and then have someone like, you know, Death Trooper and Director Krennic with Death Trooper, and then maybe Grand Moff Tarkin sitting over in the corner, and Shore Trooper. You know, you can mix it up, but Grand Moff Tarkin puts a lot of debuffs down, and can hit pretty hard because that potency stack. And so there's just lots of really good characters in here. Imperial Probe Droid I would leave on offense, so you can go in and strategically blow somebody up that you'd like to blow up. Your Imperial Troopers, I would never put them on defense. I would always use them as an offensive team, and you can modify them. You don't have to use an all Imperial Trooper team, but if you were going to, they actually work surprisingly well against an Empire Thrawn-led team, surprisingly. And so you can really kind of chew through those teams as well. But Empire teams work great on offense and defense. You're just going to have to decide, you know, what you're facing. And the reason why I'm kind of being vague on this specific team comp with Empire is because what you face with Shadowlands may be different than what I'm facing, and certain team comps that we are using might not work for what you're facing because it may not be the right tools. Just remember, certain teams need certain tools like buff immunity or ability block, or, you know, you want some sort of massive damage dealer like an Executor or an Annihilate. So always keep those types of tools in mind when you're building your team comps. But Empire is huge. You can build an offensive team with Empire and a defensive team with Empire pretty easily. For Territory Wars, the same is true and can be said about Rebels. Absolutely. Rebels teams are crazy. There's a ton of them. You can use CLS-led, like, you know, counter squads. Inside, I know a lot of people that use like Commander Luke Skywalker and Ezra with, you know, like Chirrut Bays, or they use Commander Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Chirrut Bays. But like Chirrut Bays with Commander Luke Skywalker and another damage dealer like Han Solo or Ezra, just, it really makes for a difficult team. And if you add a second tank like K2SO that's disruptive or someone, it just makes for a very difficult team to chew through. They have to dedicate a lot of team to beat it, and then that's that many less characters they have on offense to work on other teams. And truth be told, these aren't the most overpowered teams, but it does make them commit to a decent team. And you've got a Sabine Zeta. What's really cool about that is you could actually use your Phoenix on defense, and people are going to underestimate them and throw in kind of a crap squad to beat them and end up losing because they didn't realize that the team had what it had. But of course, with now the Zeta notifications on the faces of the characters, it might make it a little bit easier now for people to figure that out. But with Rebels, just like Empire, I'm going to be kind of vague. There's just a ton of team composition capability here. For offense, you could run an Admiral Akbar lead and use like a Hermit Yoda and Ezra Bridger, things like that. You can also, like I said, use CLS on defense, or you can use him on offense. He's kind of a great joker. With him and Han Solo, those two guys together, you can put about anybody behind them as long as you add some tanks and stuff, and you can chew through almost any of the meta teams. So really one of those teams, one of those characters that's really great on defense, but if you can keep him for offense, it'll really help give you a couple of really powerful tools to chew through some of those more durable teams that you may be facing. But just remember, synergy kind of wins out when it comes to these battles. And so a lot of these characters, if they're with their similar counterparts, such as a Rogue One team, they're going to do better than if they are, parted out and put in a team with certain other people. So with Rebels, you can have them on offense or defense. They work really, really well. And as far as the Sith meta goes, you can use your literal team that everybody's using as the current meta team. You can use that on defense. For Territory Wars, I would actually replace Thrawn, so you have him available for another team with somebody else. And so what I'm saying is Emperor Palpatine with like Darth Scion, Darth Nihilus, and then maybe Sith Assassin and Sith Trooper. Things like that are a good use of these characters. It's still a very difficult team to beat, and it forces them to commit a good team, a really good team, to beating it. With Sith Trooper and Sith Assassin, you'd have some work to do. And then you can also run a Darth Maul lead, both on offense and defense. It works pretty well as far as all of the evasion that they get and stuff. It's a bit annoying, and when people are playing Territory Wars, they tend to be a little bit more protective of what they're doing and take their time, and you can actually time someone out because people tend to fight much slower in a territorial war battle than they do traditional battles, because they're trying not to make any mistakes because of how important these territorial war battles are. So Darth Maul and a number of other Sith have their place, but you can see what Sith you have, and you can make a team composition based on what you have. Some people would use like your top row and leave Darth Nihilus out. I know if you pull Darth Nihilus, a lot of people say, well, then you should pull Darth Scion. Not necessarily. Darth Nihilus on offense really helps you annihilate somebody important and gives you that ability to chew through offensively a team. And the team on defense with Scion and no Nihilus, as long as you're using all the other characters like Maul and Palp and Savage and Vader, it's going to still be a really terrible team for them to face and have to beat. And even if they beat it, it's still at least freed up one tool for you to use on offense. So this is where it comes down to your teams and really figuring out, who in Shadowlands has had really great luck with certain team comps. If you can pull Nihilus out and find a comp that works really well and you see it defending more than others, then that's the direction you're going to want to go. But keeping key characters like Wampa and Yoda and Darth Nihilus and the Imperial Probe Droid, these are all characters, CLS, these are all things that you can use offensively to build an entire team around to make sure that you can chew through all of those certain teams. Now, as far as offense for Territory Wars, we talked about a lot of them. Commander Luke Skywalker is going to be really good to go against Thrawn teams. So if you have, Rebels, that would be a great way as well. And we're going to go back to your main thing for characters. because you do also have Rex at gear 12. Rex and like Wampa combined, or Rex and a damage dealer like Han Solo combined for really great to be able to go against like the CLS teams that you're going to find. You know, Resistance I mentioned was great on offense. Ewoks are going to be great on offense. Let's look at your Ewoks to see where they are at. I did take a look at them. That's right. So if you were going to go in on an Ewok team, and by the way, you're not far from having a really good Ewok team. These guys, I wouldn't use them on defense. I'd use them on offense. You make your Poplu real fast. Use Poplu, Logray, Wicket, Chirpa, Elder, and that would be the team of 5. Don't worry about T-Bor or Scout. Use Chirpa as a lead and Zeta it, and even Wicket. If you wanted to Zeta, you could, because he has that protection regeneration for the whole team when he crits, and so that's a really great Zeta as well. But definitely Chief Chirpas, and you'd want this team around gear 10, and then it becomes critical that good mods go on the right characters. You know how to mod characters, but you know, crit chance, crit damage on Wicket. Definitely want Poplu to have tankiness, but speed as well. So lots of protection, lots of speed. And then, you know, Chief Chirpa really is just going to end up becoming another damage dealer. So you could do crit chance, crit damage on him. Ewok Elder, health, because he's a healer, and he's going to be reviving individuals and whatnot. So that would be my suggestion is Ewoks. They're one of the teams on offense that you could develop. And I know people laugh at them, but they do really well on offense, especially if you get that double Zeta going with Chirpa and Wicket as well. Thrawn you can use as an anti-Emperor Palpatine team. So a lot of people are using Emperor Palpatine now as the leader in a defensive squad, and people are like, how am I going to beat it? Use a Thrawn team. Not only are you going to regenerate health and protection if his leadership is Zetaed, but he's just a phenomenal one-off character that you can bring in, like I said, to build a team around that's going to help you. You can bring in characters such as B2 Battle Droid, Royal Guard, Sunfac as tanks to kind of keep them around, and then bring in someone like a one-off like Death Trooper to really assist and aid in the damage dealing. And with Death Trooper and his ability to death mark, that's just really great synergy. So, you know, you could also bring in Grand Moff Tarkin underneath Thrawn. He does decent damage that way as well and will generate health and protection. Or you can bring in Thrawn and Shore Trooper, Tarkin, Trooper, and Krennic. I mean, there's a bunch of combinations there, but you can use the Thrawn-led teams to go against the Emperor Palpatine-led teams. And then, of course, you know, your Night Sisters I had mentioned already. So your Night Sisters look great, and I already mentioned them, of course. You also have other combinations you could use, like your Bounty Hunters, and then also don't forget your Darth Vader and your Wampa. If you can keep the Wampa and Darth Vader out of defensive teams for whatever reason, make substitutions, put different characters in those teams, and leave them out. A Darth Vader lead with Wampa or a Rex lead with Wampa, that's again another really great offensive combo that you can kind of build behind it. Some superficiality from like Sunfac and Royal Guard and things like that to protect them, but it would put up a ton of dots. You could even bring in Boba Fett into this Darth Vader Wampa team, and it's pretty destructive. And if you're going against like a CLS defensive team, you're going to walk right through it, even if they have Zetas and things like that. So definitely just know what your opponent is and then kind of where you're going with it. I hope this Territory War general overview of offensive and defensive teams was of help. If you have any other questions, Keith, make sure you leave them in the comments down below. You know where you're able to get a hold of me on Discord, send messages that way as well. And everybody, keep your gaming on. Warrior out.